Marissa, you can't just barge in here whenever you please. This is my family's cabin, not your personal playground. I stepped back from the door, watching her heel click against the porch planks like a warning. Her eyes narrowed, lips tightening into a thin line. Lena, the HOA has the right to inspect properties for compliance. You've been ignoring the notices. That garden is a code violation, and frankly, your parking arrangement doesn't meet our standards. I shook my head, voice steady but edged with tired steel. You think slapping fines and trespassing unannounced will break me down? Newsflash, I wrote the inspection protocol for state housing last year. I know every clause inside and out. That garden violation you're whining about? It's a wildflower patch planted by my late father, and the parking? I have the easement rights, inherited legally, clear as day. Marissa blinked, caught off guard for a split second before regaining her icy composure. That doesn't exempt you from following HOA rules. Oh, but it does, I said, stepping forward, gripping the old brass key hanging from my neck. It's a family heirloom, passed down through 3 generations, my late father's last gift before he passed. This cabin isn't just wood and nails, it's memories stitched into every creek and shadow. That creek behind the property, I remember fishing there with him, the water cool and sure, the crooked old maple tree out front. That's where he taught me how to stand my ground. I swallowed, my throat tight with a mix of anger and something deeper, loss and determination. This place means everything to me. You and your HOA might think you can rewrite that story, but I'm not going quietly. She pursed her lips, voice dropping. You're digging your own grave, Lena. I smiled coldly. Funny you mention graves. You might want to check what's buried in the HOA's backyard first. There be some? It was. The spark. The threat hanging between us heavier than the late afternoon sun beating down on the porch. My name's Lena Carter, state housing inspector by trade, stubborn by nature, and guardian of a legacy that won't be erased by overreaching bylaws and power trips. This fight isn't just about some garden or parking spot. It's about standing for what's right, even when the odds feel like they're stacked against you. Now, before we go deeper, I want to know, where are you watching from? Is your neighborhood like this? Have you ever felt crushed by rules meant to protect but used to control? Stick around, 'cause this story's about to get messy, and I'm just getting started. There's something sacred about this cabin, something no paper or penalty can touch. My father built it with his own hands, a patch of sanctuary carved from stubborn soil and old trees. After he died, the place became more than a retreat. It's the last tangible piece of him I have. Every weathered board, every creak underfoot is a memory, a story told in the language of wood and wind. The crooked maple out front, gnarled, uneven, looks like it should have toppled years ago, but it stands. I learned from Dad that sometimes standing crooked is better than falling straight. That tree is my silent witness through all this. When the HOA sent their first letter, a polite nudge about property standards, I thought it was a misunderstanding. But then the fines came, then the visits without notice. Marissa, with her clipboard and smug smile, acting like she owns the place. I'm not someone who backs down, not when my family's history is on the line. This isn't just about rules, it's about respect, about justice. And I plan to take every step necessary to protect that, starting with standing toe-to-toe with Marissa Langdon and her overbearing board. The morning after my standoff with Marissa, I found an envelope slipped under my cabin door, its sharp edges cut through the calm like a blade. The HOA's seal glared back, official and intimidating. Inside lay a formal violation notice, an escalating list of grievances. This time, it wasn't just the garden or parking. They cited unauthorized placement of outdoor furniture, non-compliant storage shed, and improper lawn maintenance. The fines piled up, $500 for each supposed infraction. I stared at the letter, a familiar knot tightening in my chest. This wasn't about rules anymore. It was personal. They were squeezing every angle to push me out. Out front, the crooked maple tree leaned over the porch like a silent sentinel, the same one Dad planted decades ago. My fingers found the old brass key hanging from my neck, a family heirloom heavy with history. This cabin was more than just a structure. It was home, memory, blood. Later, while running errands, the tension followed me like a shadow. At the grocery store, whispers trailed behind me, neighbors shooting sidelong glances, a few smirks barely hidden. Marissa's reach was long and calculated. Carla caught up with me in the produce aisle. Her usual warm smile tightened with worry. "Lena, I heard about the notices." She glanced around like the walls might have ears. "Marissa's cracking down, hard. Are you sure you want to keep going like this?" I sighed, knowing her hesitation wasn't cowardice but fear. "I don't have a choice, Carla. This cabin, it's all that's left of Dad. If I lose it, it's like losing him all over again." Her eyes softened, but she stayed silent, just nodding. Back home, my mailbox overflowed with more HOA letters. One demanded trimming of unapproved vegetation. Another claimed excessive noise from gatherings. Laughable. I hadn't hosted anyone in weeks. Instead of breaking, I took control. I started compiling every letter, every photo of the property, even the faded maps Dad had drawn years ago. Those old maps were more than paper. They were proof of my rights. Determined, I chose. Went up at the community center, hoping to catch Marissa before the evening meeting. She was waiting, as always, with that cool, smug smile. "Lena," she purred, voice like honey laced with venom. "Still fighting, huh? You know this isn't personal, just standards." "Standards that shift to suit your whims?" I shot back. "You're weaponizing rules to bully people. This isn't about community, it's about control." Her smirk twisted. "What will you do? File lawsuits? Drain your savings? Waste your time?" I met her gaze evenly. "Whatever it takes." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "Be careful what you wish for." Her words hung heavy, but I wasn't backing down. In the days that followed, the pressure mounted. Anonymous complaints arrived at my door. Neighbors' smiles turned cold. Inspections seemed timed to unsettle me. Yet, I stayed vigilant. Every notice, every call, every interaction was logged with care. I carried my camera everywhere, snapping photos of the property and suspicious activity. What unsettled me most, though, were the board members who didn't seem fully aligned with Marissa. I noticed them during meetings. Uneasy shifts, whispered doubts, quick glances exchanged when she wasn't looking. Elliot Hayes, a quiet man with steady eyes, caught my attention. He avoided meeting my gaze when I asked questions, hands sometimes trembling slightly. His silence felt like a secret begging to be shared, and I had a feeling it was the thread that could unravel Marissa's tight grip. Elliot Hayes was a man you'd easily overlook, mid-50s, quiet, with a habit of staring at his shoes when the room got tense. But beneath that unassuming surface, I sensed a storm. The next HOA meeting was crawling with that usual tension. Marissa's presence dominated the room, her sharp eyes, clipped words slicing through conversation like a blade. I slipped in, nodding briefly at Carla, who, gave me a small, nervous smile. During the meeting, Marissa unveiled yet another round of community standards updates, but what caught my attention was Elliot's hands, fidgeting with a pen, trembling just enough to betray his calm exterior. Afterward, as the room emptied, I found myself alone with him near the back exit. "Elliot," I said softly, careful not to draw attention, "you don't have to do this alone." He blinked, eyes darting around, then whispered, "You don't know what you're up against. Try me." He hesitated, voice barely above a breath. They're watching. Listening. Everything's recorded. Marissa's not just playing for control, she's hiding things that could ruin the neighborhood. My pulse quickened. Like what? His hands trembled more, then he pulled a crumpled note from his pocket. "This!" He shoved it into my palm before hurrying away. I unfolded it carefully later, meeting minutes, handwritten and marked up with notes about funds disappearing, payments that didn't add up. It was the first real crack in Marissa's armor. But the real bombshell came the next day. Carla called me, voice shaking. "Lena, I don't know how to say this, but I overheard Marissa on the phone last night. She's planning something that could affect everyone's homes, including yours." "What kind of something?" "A vote to increase fines, drastically, and possibly, foreclosures if people can't pay." The words hit like a gut punch. Foreclosures. On families. On homes. I sat on the porch beneath the crooked maple, the weight of it settling in. This wasn't just about petty rules anymore. It was a threat to the very fabric of our community. And Marissa was willing to burn it all down to keep her grip. That evening, I decided to confront her directly again, this time armed with Elliot's notes. She opened the door before I knocked, eyes cold as steel. "I know what you're hiding, Marissa," I said, holding up the papers. "Funds missing, abuse of power, this ends." Her smile was venomous. "You think that little note is enough? You're delusional." "I'm not alone. There are people who see what you're doing." I glanced toward the street where a few neighbors stood watching silently. Marissa's jaw tightened. "Watch your step, Lena. You're playing a dangerous game." I turned away, voice steady. "Maybe, but I'm done playing by your rules." As I walked back toward the cabin, the sun dipping behind the trees, I knew this was no longer just a fight for my family's legacy. It was a battle for truth, justice, and survival. And something deep inside me shifted. Fear gave way to resolve. Because sometimes, the quietest storms are the ones that break the hardest. Where are you watching from right now? Have you ever faced a fight that felt bigger than just rules, something personal, tied to home or family? Drop a comment and share your story. Stay with me. This battle's just heating up and you won't want to miss what happens next. The night before the neighborhood meeting, I barely slept. The weight of what was coming pressed down hard like the heavy air before a storm. When I arrived early at the community center, the place was already buzzing with low murmurs and sideways glances. People circled in small groups, some whispering, others just watching me as if I were an intruder in my own backyard. Marissa appeared at the entrance like a queen ready to hold court, her smile sharp and eyes calculating. The room hushed as she stepped up to the podium, commanding attention without effort. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began smoothly, voice measured but laced with steel. "Recent events have caused disruption, and it's imperative we discuss the importance of community standards and order." Her glance swept the room, locking briefly on me. That look alone said it all. "You are the source of this trouble." Then, with practiced ease, she shifted gears. "There are growing concerns regarding the inspection methods and property management of certain residents. Our neighborhood thrives on respect and uniformity, and personal agendas can't be allowed to threaten that." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of agreement and unease. Some nodded, others exchanged looks that said maybe we shouldn't be here, but no one spoke up. Carla caught my eye from across the room, her lips pressed tight, as if she was biting back words she wished she could say. She looked torn, loyalty pulling one way, fear dragging the other. I stood slowly, voice steady, though my heart hammered. "I'm not here to disrupt for disruption's sake. This cabin isn't just property. It's my family's legacy. My father built this place with his own hands. As a state housing inspector, I have a duty to protect homes like mine and communities like ours from abuse, not to tear them apart." Marissa's smile hardened, her eyes cold. "And yet, Lena, your actions have only sown discord. The board's responsibility is to safeguard all residents, not just individual interests." The room shifted uneasily. A few people coughed or glanced away. Whispers spread, like wildfire waiting for a spark. I held their gaze. Real protection means transparency and fairness, not fines piled on with no explanation. It means accountability, not cover-ups and intimidation. That's what I'm here for, to expose that. Faces softened. I caught a glimpse of quiet hope flicker in some eyes, the ones that had been silenced for too long. After the meeting, Carla caught up with me outside, voice hushed. "You were incredible. I'm sorry it took me so long to see what was really going on. You gave people courage." I gave her a small smile. "This fight's far from over, but we're starting to turn the tide." Back at the cabin, I pulled out the papers Elliot had given me. The handwritten notes, the confusing financial records, the faded receipts. Each document was a puzzle piece revealing a bigger picture. Money missing, payments hidden, deals made in the dark. The more I dug, the more I realized this wasn't just about petty rules or personal grudges. This was systemic corruption. I started plotting my next moves, knowing Marissa's grip on the community was stronger than anyone admitted. Later that night, something stirred me from sleep, a faint scratching at the window. Heart racing, I peeked through the curtains, nothing but shadows dancing under the crooked maple tree outside. That tree, leaning, resilient, seemed to watch over the cabin like a sentinel, a symbol of endurance amid chaos. I ran a hand over the old brass key around my neck, a connection to my past and my resolve. This wasn't just a fight for a patch of land or a garden. It was a fight for truth, for justice, for the memory of my father who built this place. And I wasn't going anywhere. The basement of the community center wasn't a place anyone volunteered to go. Dim, cramped, and smelling of damp wood and forgotten years, it was more graveyard than archive. But I had no choice. If I wanted to understand the full picture, I needed to go digging where no one looked. The flickering overhead bulbs cast an eerie glow, shadows twisting on the cracked concrete walls. My boots echoed softly as I stepped deeper between stacks of dusty boxes and moldy file folders. A thin layer of dust coated everything, disturbed only where time and neglect had taken their toll. I reached out and pulled open an old filing cabinet, its metal handle cold in my hand. The lock groaned, reluctant but no match for a little persistence. Inside, stacks of paper tumbled out, meeting minutes, invoices, receipts, handwritten notes in various faded inks. One folder caught my eye, a thick bundle marked Financials, Private. I sifted through the pages, feeling the coarse texture of cheap paper under my fingertips. Line after line, numbers failed to add up, payments missing, unexplained transfers, vague descriptions like community expenses masking something darker. Then I spotted it, a typed memo from Marissa herself instructing the board to redirect funds quietly and tighten the screws on dissenters. I swallowed hard. A sudden noise, footsteps creaking above, snapped me out of my focus. Heart hammering, I tucked the papers into my bag and moved toward a small wooden crate tucked under the stairwell. It was heavy, dusty, sealed with old tape. Inside, I found a battered voice recorder, its buttons worn smooth by years of use. Fingers trembling, I pressed play. Static hissed before a cold, clipped voice filled the cramped space. Marissa's unmistakable tone, calm and ruthless, ordering increased fines, threats to quiet neighbors who dared oppose her, plans to freeze out anyone not towing the line. My breath caught. The words were deliberate, calculated. This wasn't just power tripping, it was a campaign of intimidation. Sinking to the cold floor, the weight of it pressed down on me, anger, fear, and something fierce rising from deep inside. The sound of footsteps grew louder overhead, then a hesitant voice. "Lena?" I froze. A familiar figure stepped through the doorway, Elliot Hayes, his eyes shadowed with guilt and dread. "I didn't know you'd find this," he whispered, voice cracking. "I wanted to protect you. Protect myself." I looked up, locking eyes with his. "You've been carrying this alone?" He nodded, voice barely audible. "I was scared, Marissa. She's dangerous." We sat together in the dim light, the recorder playing on between us, a testament to truth long hidden. Later, when the recorder was safely tucked away, back at my cabin, the crooked maple outside bent with the restless wind, branches tapping against the window like a heartbeat. That tree had weathered storms and silence alike. Like me, it refused to fall. Holding the recorder, I knew this fight had grown beyond me. It was a fight for every neighbor silenced by fear, every voice crushed beneath Marissa's iron grip, and with this evidence, we finally had a weapon. That morning, I woke with a tight knot in my stomach, but beneath it, a fierce resolve. What I'd uncovered wasn't just dirt to be swept under the rug, it was a weapon, and I was ready to wield it. First call was to my lawyer, a sharp woman who didn't sugarcoat. When I explained everything, her tone went serious, no nonsense. "Lena, this is solid. Financial mismanagement, intimidation, misuse of power, you're sitting on a potential legal bombshell. But to make it stick, we need more. Recent documents, fresh recordings, eyewitnesses." The message was clear. Time to go from defensive to offensive. I spent the day installing discrete cameras, small, almost invisible, around my cabin and the community center where the HOA gathered. It felt odd at first, spying on neighbors, but Marissa's moves left no choice. Every whispered phone call, every shadowy meeting had to be caught. Elliot stopped by that evening. He looked drained, lines deeper than the last time I saw him. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I can't stay quiet any longer. If Marissa's this ruthless, we need proof. Live proof of her schemes. Old files aren't enough." I nodded, understanding the risk he was taking. "We'll get it. We'll catch her in the act." Together, we planned to attend the next HOA meeting with cameras rolling, ready to expose whatever skullduggery unfolded. Carla surprised me by stepping forward, too. "I'm scared," she admitted one afternoon as we watched the crooked maple's branches sock value, all in the wind. "But I'm tired of watching neighbors get steamrolled. I want to stand with you." Her words gave me strength I hadn't realized I needed. The fight wasn't mine alone anymore. But Marissa wasn't idle. The retaliation came fast. A letter appeared on my porch the next morning, official-looking and cold. The HOA revoked my access to the community's dock and trails, citing vague bylaw violations. No specifics, just a power move designed to isolate and intimidate. I stood beneath the crooked maple, rain threatening to fall, letter in hand, feeling that familiar ache in my chest. But this time it fueled me. Marissa's tactics were ruthless, but I was built for this. At the next board meeting, I didn't hesitate. "I have evidence of financial misconduct and intimidation," I said, voice steady but sharp, "and I'm ready to share it with everyone here." Marissa's face hardened, eyes flashing with anger. "Baseless accusations," she snapped. "You're grasping at straws." But then I pressed play on the recorder. Her voice filled the room, cold and commanding. "Increase fines, squeeze dissenters, freeze out troublemakers." Silence fell, the air thick with disbelief and unease. Eyes darted around the room. Some board members exchanged nervous glances. I caught Elliot's gaze. He nodded, a silent ally in the storm. After the meeting, Marissa cornered me in the parking lot, voice low and threatening. "You're digging your own grave, Lena. Back off now." I met her cold stare with calm defiance. "No, this is about justice, not your control." That night, back on the porch, the wind rustled the crooked maple's leaves. I ran my hand over the old brass key around my neck. It was a reminder, the legacy I was fighting for, the resilience I needed to hold. This fight was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt the tide beginning to turn. Where are you watching this from? Ever felt pushed to the edge by people in power who think rules give them the right to control your life? Share your story below. Your voice matters. Stick around because the fight's just getting real, and I'm not backing down anytime soon. The tension twisting inside me had finally snapped into action. Marissa's threats didn't slow down. If anything, they grew sharper, more venomous. But sitting still wasn't an option. Not anymore. Elliot and I found ourselves in a quiet corner of that local coffee shop, the kind where the hum of espresso machines masks everything you don't want overheard. He slid a slightly worn manila envelope across the scratched wooden table, eyes flickering with a mix of relief and exhaustion. "Here," he whispered, voice low. "Emails, bank records, expense logs, enough to tie Marissa to the missing funds. But there's more. Documents she's buried deep. I haven't managed to get all of it yet." My pulse quickened. "This is what we need. But we've got to be careful. No rushing. If we push too fast, she'll bury everything, cover her tracks." Carla showed up soon after, clutching her phone tight like a lifeline. "I've started quietly talking to neighbors. Some want to help, but they're scared. We need a plan to pull the whole community together." Hope sparked in me. A united front would be harder to silence than just one stubborn woman. The plan was simple, brutal. At the next HOA meeting, we'd record everything, every threat, every slip of the tongue. The cameras I'd set up were ready, angles adjusted, batteries tested. "Ready for this?" Elliot asked, eyes scanning the dim coffee shop. I swallowed, voice steady, as ready as I'll ever be. That night, the crooked maple outside my cabin swayed in the breeze, its branches creaking like whispered encouragement. That tree, twisted and scarred but standing firm, had become my symbol. No matter how bent or battered, strength endured. At the meeting, Marissa commanded the room with the usual icy grace, but this time I wasn't just an observer. When she launched into a tirade about new rules and crushing fines, I raised my phone. "I'm recording this meeting." The room's chatter stopped, heads turned. A few neighbors exchanged surprised looks. Marissa's confident smile wavered, a flicker of unease crossing her face. "Is that legal?" A voice from the crowd asked, "Can you do that?" "It's my right," I said, voice firm, "especially with everything at stake." Marissa tried to regain control, barking orders, trying to intimidate the room, but her voice cracked, frustration bleeding through. The cameras caught every moment, every harsh command, every veiled threat. After the meeting, Elliot handed me another envelope, more files, and a list of board members who might finally be ready to break ranks. I caught Carla's eye. "Time to bring the whole neighborhood in. Transparency is our weapon now." She smiled, determination lighting her face. "Let's do it." Later, sitting on the porch, the wind rattled the crooked maple's leaves again, a soft, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat, reminding me we were still standing. This wasn't just a fight anymore, it was a movement. Together, we were stronger. The morning of the HOA meeting arrived heavy with anticipation. The community center buzzed with quiet conversations, whispers that carried a mix of hope and tension. I walked in steady, the small cameras I'd carefully hidden recording every angle. My phone was set to capture the entire meeting. No surprises this time. Marissa sat at the head of the board's table, her posture rigid, lips pressed tight in a practiced mask of control. She expected confrontation, and she wanted it. But this wasn't going to be the same meeting as before. Neighbors filed in, filling the chairs, their faces a mix of hesitation, curiosity, and something new, resolve. Carla caught my eye from the back, her nod subtle but steady, a quiet anchor in the storm. Marissa began with her usual rhetoric about preserving community standards and protecting neighborhood values. Her voice was calm, but beneath it simmered a barely contained edge, like a simmering fire ready to flare. I raised my phone, breaking the murmur. This meeting is being recorded in full, every word, every action. My voice cut through the room, steady and clear. For the briefest moment, Marissa's mask slipped. A flicker of something, unease maybe, crossed her eyes before she snapped it back. As she launched into her prepared speech, the recording caught the subtle threats woven between her words, the coercive undertones aimed at silencing dissenters and tightening her grip on the neighborhood. The room shifted. Some neighbors exchanged uneasy glances. Others leaned forward, caught in the unfolding drama. An elderly woman near the front raised a trembling hand. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Are these accusations true? That our money has been misused? That some are threatened into silence?" I nodded, voice firm but gentle. "Yes, I have evidence, and there's more coming." The atmosphere thickened. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, eyes flicking toward Elliot, whose face was pale but resolute. Marissa's eyes narrowed. She opened her mouth to retort but was drowned out as Carla stood up, her voice steady and strong despite the room's tension. "I'm tired of being afraid," Carla declared. "I've seen neighbors silenced, afraid to speak up, but no more. We deserve honesty, respect, and fairness. We deserve to protect our homes from bullying." Her words sparked something. Nods rippled through the crowd, quiet affirmations growing louder. Marissa's control waned visibly. The iron grip she wielded felt less certain under the weight of the community's awakening. I stepped forward, heart pounding but voice steady. "This fight isn't just about me or one cabin. It's about every person here who wants to live without fear, with dignity. It's about justice." The crowd's energy shifted palpably. Where there was once hesitation, now stirred Kura. As the meeting wrapped up, promises were made, investigations to be opened, demands for transparency to be heard. It wasn't a full victory, but it was a turning point, a crack in the dam. Outside, the crooked maple tree stood tall against the afternoon sky, its leaves whispering in the breeze like a guardian watching over us. It had weathered countless storms, and so had we. Later, sitting on my porch, the old brass key warm in my palm, I reflected on how far this journey had come. The fight was far from over, but for the first time the tide was shifting. This wasn't just a personal battle anymore. It was a movement, one fueled by truth, courage, and community. And like that crooked maple, we would endure. The days following the community meeting felt like walking a razor-thin line. Hope and tension tangled tight with every breath I took. The truth had begun to seep through the cracks, but Marissa's wrath was no less fierce. If anything, it grew colder, more calculated. I'd officially filed complaints with the state housing authorities, sending in every scrap of evidence Elliot and I had painstakingly gathered. The wheels of justice moved slow, grinding against the machinery of a well-connected HOA, but they moved nonetheless. In retaliation, notices arrived daily, threats of eviction based on vague community conduct violations, fines piling up like a relentless storm hammering against my resolve. The latest notice, slipped under my door at dawn, was unsigned but unmistakably official-looking. Each letter got logged, every phone call recorded. My lawyer sprang into action, drafting motions to block these baseless threats, pointing out procedural missteps and abuse of authority. This wasn't just about the cabin anymore. It was a battle for dignity. From behind curtained windows, neighbors watched cautiously. Some sent silent nods as I passed. Others whispered support. He, sitant but real. Carla visited often, bearing coffee and updates. "People want to help," she said one afternoon, her voice low and earnest. "They just need the courage to step forward safely." Elliot's calls became more frequent, his voice edged with urgency. I've spoken to a few board members. They're scared, but many are ready to break ranks if the proof is ironclad. Good, I told him. We'll need every ally before Marissa pulls her next move. Night after night, I pored over financial statements and faded invoices, eyes stinging from hours of scanning forged signatures, strange account numbers, and shell company names. It was a tangled web of deceit, complex, but the pattern was clear. Outside, the crooked maple whispered against my window, its rough branches scraping the glass like a quiet companion reminding me of what was at stake and what had to be protected. Legal hearings loomed closer. Expert witnesses, accountants, housing law specialists were lined up, ready to dismantle Marissa's lies piece by piece. The community's undercurrent of fear began shifting to cautious optimism, even as the threats against me escalated. Anonymous calls filled my voicemail, silence on the other end, but the message was clear. Cars idled suspiciously near the cabin, shadows watching from darkened streets. I didn't flinch. This fight stretched beyond my family's cabin or the stubborn maple tree out front. It was about justice, transparency for the whole community, protection against unchecked authority, the right to dignity. And I wasn't backing down. Have you ever faced a fight where standing up felt risky but necessary? Share your experience below. Your story might give someone else the courage to keep going. Stay tuned, because the next chapter is about to shake things up even more. The courthouse felt colder than I expected, the sterile walls reflecting the weight of the conflict that had dragged on far too long. The room buzzed with tension. Neighbors packed into rows, faces a mix of hope, skepticism, and exhaustion. Marissa entered like she owned the place, sharp suit, sharper eyes, but her usual confident swagger carried a subtle edge, a flicker of uncertainty beneath the surface. I sat beside my lawyer, hands tight around a thick folder filled with months' worth of evidence. Voice recordings, bank statements, meeting minutes, all painstakingly gathered. Elliot sat a few seats down, looking pale but resolute, and Carla was near him, her quiet presence a steadying force. The judge called the session to order, and the legal battle unfolded with Marissa's attorneys attempting to paint me as a troublemaker, a thorn in the neighborhood's side. They twisted facts, questioned motives, tried to undermine everything. When it was my turn to speak, I swallowed the knot in my throat and faced the room. This fight isn't about one woman or one property. It's about every resident here who deserves fairness, transparency, and the right to live without fear of intimidation or unjust fines. I laid out the evidence clearly, letting the recordings speak for themselves. Marissa's voice, cold and commanding, echoed through the speakers. Orders to intimidate dissenters, manipulate finances, and consolidate control. Elliot took the stand next. His testimony was honest, sometimes shaky, but unmistakably genuine. Marissa's attorneys tried to shake him, but he held fast, answering every question with quiet strength. The courtroom was still, the weight of truth settling in like a heavy fog. Throughout it all, I pictured the crooked maple tree at my cabin, battered by storms but still standing. That tree had become my anchor, a symbol of resilience and legacy. It reminded me why I had fought so hard. After hours that felt like days, the judge finally spoke. The verdict was clear. Marissa and several complicit board members were to step down immediately. An independent review of the HOA's finances would begin, and all unjust fines were to be rescinded. A breath of relief swept through the room. Neighbors whispered, some wiping away tears, others exchanging quiet smiles. Outside, Carla found me first. "You did it," she said, voice trembling with pride. Elliot, once so afraid to speak, now stood taller, a weight visibly lifted from his shoulders. Back at my cabin, I stepped onto the porch, the familiar rough bark of the crooked maple brushing against the evening breeze. I held the brass key, warm and solid in my palm, feeling the weight of what it represented. Family, struggle, victory. This wasn't just my win. It belonged to everyone who had stood beside me, silent or loud, in the face of injustice. And as the sun set behind the trees, I knew the legacy of that cabin and the spirit of this community would endure. The community hall buzzed with attention I hadn't seen before, a weight hanging heavy between every breath, every whispered conversation. People came from all corners of the neighborhood, filling every chair, crowding into doorways, their faces marked by months of worry, frustration, and a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this gathering could change everything. Marissa sat at the head table, her posture stiff and controlled, but the usual glint of confidence in her eyes had dimmed. She scanned the crowd with a mix of suspicion and thinly veiled anxiety, her carefully crafted armor starting to crack. I took my place at the front. The brass key hanging around my neck felt like it carried the weight of every story in this room. The stories of families battered by fines, neighbors silenced by fear, a community held hostage by one woman's thirst for control. "My name is Lena Carter," I began, voice steady, holding the room's gaze. "This fight has never been just about me or a single cabin. It's about all of us, the families who deserve fairness, respect, and a voice. For too long, silence has been the price we paid to live here." I laid out the evidence we'd gathered over months, the financial documents showing misused funds, the voice recordings capturing Marissa's threats and manipulations, and testimonies from people brave enough to speak despite the risks. Faces shifted in the crowd. Some nodded solemnly, others exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Marissa's jaw clenched tight, lips pressed so thin I feared they might crack. But she remained silent, her usual sharp tongue caught somewhere between fury and defeat. Then Carla stood beside me, her voice trembling but fierce. "I'm tired of living in fear," she said, eyes sweeping the room. "I've seen friends threatened, neighbors pushed out. But today we stand together. No more silence." One by one, neighbors began to stand. A grandmother recounted how she'd been fined for a bird feeder. A father spoke about late-night calls threatening his family. Each story was a thread in the tapestry of injustice that Marissa had woven, and now it unraveled before us all. The room's energy shifted, the fear that had once held tight now giving way to a collective power. Marissa rose, her voice sharp and bitter as she tried to regain control, accusing me of lies and disruption. But the momentum had passed, the community had found its voice. When the vote came to remove Marissa and the board members implicated in the scandal, the decision was unanimous, the relief tangible. People hugged, wiped tears, whispered promises to rebuild. Outside, the crooked maple tree swayed gently in the evening breeze, its branches catching the fading light like a silent witness to the community's rebirth. I stood on my porch later, the brass key warm in my hand, reflecting on how fragile and precious this victory was. This fight wasn't just about rules or property. It was about reclaiming dignity, community, and the right to belong. And like that crooked tree, battered but unbroken, our neighborhood would endure. The morning after the vote, the neighborhood felt different, lighter, almost as if a long-held breath had finally been released. The air carried a sharper edge, fresh and new, like the scent of rain soaking into dry earth. But the fight was far from over. Justice, I'd learned, never arrives clean or simple. It lingers, demanding care and vigilance even after the crowd has dispersed. A new board was sworn in that day, under the watchful gaze of the community. They promised transparency, fairness, and an end to the shadowy dealings that had ruled us. I sat toward the back of the hall, watching neighbors speak freely for the first time in years. Voices that had once been muffled now rang clear and strong, shaping a future that had once seemed impossible. Elliot caught my eye from across the room. His usual nervous energy had settled into something steadier, a quiet confidence born from finally stepping out of fear. He gave me a small, grateful smile, a wordless acknowledgement of the journey we'd endured. Afterwards, Carla approached me, her face soft but weary. "We did it, Lena," she said quietly. "But Sean, it feels strange, doesn't it? Like we fought so hard just to start over, to rebuild." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. It's not just winning a vote or ousting one person, it's waking up to a new reality and choosing every day to protect it. Back at the cabin, the crooked maple stood sentinel outside my window. Its gnarled branches reached out against the soft sunlight, casting shifting shadows on the porch. I traced my fingers over the brass key hanging from my neck, worn smooth by time and struggle. That key wasn't just metal, it was my father's legacy, a symbol of everything we'd fought for: dignity, respect, and the right to hold fast to what truly matters. I thought back on all the pieces of this battle, the small victories, the quiet betrayals, the moments of doubt, and the bursts of courage. Each one had woven itself into the fabric of our story. Victory, I realized, wasn't about wiping the slate clean. It was about reclaiming our community's soul. It was about that crooked maple, standing tall despite storms that could have uprooted it. And it was about understanding that sometimes the strongest roots are the ones hidden deep beneath the surface, unseen but unbreakable. I sat on the porch as the day faded, the breeze rustling the maple's leaves, whispering the secrets of resilience and hope. The fight had changed us all. It had reshaped not just the neighborhood, but who we were as neighbors, as friends, as a community. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something I hadn't in months: peace. I'll leave you with this. Justice isn't just a courtroom battle. It's the quiet strength to stand your ground when the world pushes back. Have you ever faced a fight that felt bigger than rules or contracts? Maybe a battle with your own HOA, landlord, or neighborhood power? Share your story in the comments below, because your voice deserves to be heard and your struggle seen. Where are you watching from? Let me know. And stay tuned, because standing up for what's right isn't just a moment. It's a journey, and we're in this together.